Top Digital Government Service Delivery Trends Survey presented by PayIt. During today's presentation, we have a fantastic panel that will take us through the findings of the survey, which this presentation is based upon. So let me hand this off to Kelly Davis-Fellner, CMO at PayIt, who will introduce our guest presenters as well. Kelly, over to you.
Thank you, Nadia. It's great to be here, and I am absolutely delighted to have two awesome guests with us today. I am very pleased to introduce Rachel McClure, who is the Assistant Collector of Revenue for the City of St. Louis, and Mark Stoff, who is the Chief of Staff for that office. Rachel and Mark, really thankful to have the two of you here. I think you're going to bring really important perspective and point of view to this dialogue as we kind of walk through some of the findings of the survey, and really looking forward to hearing about your experiences on the ground. So thanks very much for being here. Without further ado, why don't we go ahead and move on? Just a quick introduction of PayIt in case you're not terribly familiar with us. We are a software company that provides a platform that enables state and local government organizations to deliver a customer experience with payments that helps them accelerate the shift to digital. So get more residents using online channels for transactions or service delivery versus call-in, walk-in, mail-in transactions. Agencies choose us to achieve their mission better and be able to better serve their communities because they can be more efficient, they can better and more effectively support their customers and drive resident satisfaction. We cover a wide range of government use cases, some of which are depicted here, and are very pleased to count St. Louis as one of our clients as well. So I'd like to just talk a little bit about the survey that we recently ran, which we recently published as the most current edition of our Digital Government Adoption Index. As we developed the survey this year, we started thinking about what is the current state of digital government. So, naturally, government organizations have been shifting to digital channels and starting to provide more and more services digitally over the last several years, and COVID certainly accelerated that process. But what we wanted to understand was, what is sort of the state of things today, and then what lies ahead? And so just to run the study, we did a couple of things. We surveyed both consumers as well as government respondents. So on the consumer side, we polled about 2,000, just a couple over 2,000 nationally representative consumer respondents in the United States and Canada. There was a pretty nice spread in terms of the age groups that were represented as well. And this was a combination of, urban and rural residents spread out throughout both the United States as well as Canada. And then we also polled 611 line of business and IT leaders from different government agencies in the United States and Canada. So this was confined to state and provincial level as well as local level, so county and municipal level. And then we had a mix that was about just about 2/3 IT respondents, and just under 40% of those were more kind of line of business leaders, similar to Mark and Rachel's roles. And then again, we were about 3/4 of the respondents were in the United States, and then about 1/4 of them came from Canada. So the first question, what the heck is a government customer experience anyway? Let's talk a little bit about kind of how we think about that. A government customer experience is, we sort of define it at PayIt as any interaction between a resident and a government agency. So what we have found and what we hear from our clients is that typically when residents are visiting a government organization's website, they want to find information, they want to access services, and they usually want to find or pay a bill. Like any customer experience, it can be a positive experience or a not so great experience. But the good ones are a difference maker for residents and for agencies. So, just like anywhere else in our world today, digital is really a dominant channel or a dominant part of the government customer experience. Mark and Rachel, I'm curious, do either of you have observations about, my take on what a government customer experience is today?
No, I think you're spot on. I think people certainly government can be daunting when working with them. So the goal for anybody is to get in, get out, get done what needs to be done, and have it reach a satisfactory conclusion. So I think you're spot on with your observations.
Yeah. Thanks for that. So let's talk about, we asked kind of our consumer respondents, what kinds of things happen if you have a great experience or a good experience paying a bill or interacting with a government agency online? How likely or unlikely would you be to do each of the following? I think one of the most telling results was, there's a 47% of our respondents said they would be more inclined to trust that agency. And 71% said they would recommend the service to others. And I think, that one in particular means a lot to us because most of our clients have a goal of getting more people to use digital channels. And so that word of mouth impact can really have kind of a snowball effect or a positive effect on shifting more and more transactions online. It was interesting to me also that 1 in 3 would be willing to, they'd be more inclined to vote for the elected official who oversees the agency in question. Any interesting insights from you guys, Mark and Rachel, on this one?
Well, certainly from our standpoint, seeing that someone would be interested in voting for the elected official is of great interest to us, just from the standpoint that the Collector of Revenue's office is an elected position. So very significant finding for our boss. But I think the other thing that this speaks to, and we've experienced it quite a bit, we don't have to sell PayIt a lot of times. What we're seeing now is people will go online on social media and we'll see them recommending highly, hey, just had an experience with the Collector of Revenue's office, paid through PayIt, super easy, no issue. And I find that a lot of times people are more trusting of their friends and neighbors than they are of government in general. So that definitely helps us.
Yeah, we've certainly seen that as well. Rachel, any commentary from you?
No, it's just nice to see like 71% recommended to others. I know that Mr. Daly, our boss, the Collector of Revenue, he said he goes to government meetings, he goes to neighborhood meetings, and he said it's always interesting that people who come up to him afterwards, before we had PayIt, people would always ask a lot of questions or they would have negative feedback about the office. But he said that hasn't been the case for a few years now. People are always kind of praising what we're doing, the accessibility of it, and the ease to use it.
Yeah. That's great to hear. Okay, well, let's talk about the agency dimension on this, and Mark and Rachel would love to hear your point of view as well. We asked our government agency respondents, what are the most important outcomes your organization is looking for as you think about kind of a digital customer experience platform? We had a tie in the number one, or sort of the most frequently cited outcomes. One was saving agency money through efficiency gains, so being able to operate more efficiently. But that was a tie right up there with that resident satisfaction and trust that we've kind of touched on as well. A couple of other outcomes that, kind of floated to the top of the list. Time to revenue, really important. Being able to collect revenue quickly and be able to then use that to fund essential services. And then in the number 3 spot, we had, it makes it easier to provide customer support because all of that information is in one place. Rachel, Mark, anything you would add here? Does this kind of map to how you guys think about it, or were there other interesting, other outcomes you were looking for when you guys think about digital customer experience and PayIt specifically?
Yeah, I think 1 and 2, they just go hand in hand. So we have efficiency gains, which allows us to collect the revenue faster too, besides the customer being able to pay and not have to wait for it to come through the mail. We had a process that we were doing all manually that would take hours, and now through our PayIt import, it's done in 3 seconds. So it saves so much time. Like an 8-hour process is now done in minutes. So we're able to collect the revenue faster. We're able to process the revenue faster and disperse it.
Yeah. Mark, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think the other thing that it allows us to do is when you have more time, you can work on projects that you've had to kind of push to the side because there just isn't an opportunity. What PayIt has allowed us to do is explore some other avenues for revenue collection. and to improve processes on the back end because we're not spending as much time on the front end. And to certainly, number one, improve resident satisfaction and trust. Again, that appeals to us because our boss is out there. He is selling his reputation. He's selling PayIt. He is selling the city of St. Louis. And so for the resident satisfaction to rise to a level where he is no longer fielding complaints and is rather hearing compliments, that's a game changer for us.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on. We asked consumers as well that, generally they reported pretty high satisfaction when they can complete a transaction online. But then we sort of said, hey, have you had any experiences like these as you were kind of going through that process? And 2 out of 3 of our respondents said, well, there were a couple of places where things were not maybe as smooth as they should have been. They had issues with, kind of loading times or a payment process erroring out. They had difficulty kind of navigating or finding their way through the process. Concerns about security came up quite a bit, as well as just being able to kind of find where you actually pay those bills. This was not specific to PayIt necessarily. We were polling consumers from all over the country who may or may not have had access to a service like PayIt. And it's certainly not specific to St. Louis, but I'm curious, Mark and Rachel, if you guys have had, any kind of feedback or, experiences with some of these kind of clunkier aspects of digital transactions with residents.
Sure. I think that's just the nature of technology, right? And so you're going to have these issues. The real question is, how do you deal with them? And we're very fortunate to have a team that we work with PayIt that is extremely responsive, extremely knowledgeable. They know our system, which is extremely helpful when you're trying to touch base with someone. We have a consistency with using the same people over and over. And so that, everybody's going to take a little moment to complain and get upset and say, hey, I can't do this. What's going on? But if you're able to respond quickly and at least guide them through, I think that usually makes up for that negative experience.
Yeah.
And I think some of the issues that we run into, like the difficulty navigating through the process to pay, we've expressed that, hey, we're struggling with this, and PayIt would sit there and go over it with us and say, all right, we're going to make a video that you guys can upload to your website. You can put on your social media that will show customers a step-by-step walkthrough for how to make their payment. And then we notice that the calls for that go down. Or we have a hard time finding where to pay online. So we sit down together and we say, let's look at the bill and see where we have this place. Let's look at our envelope. Can we put a QR code on the envelope that will take them directly there? They don't even have to open it anymore. We just kind of look at those things to try to make it more convenient and more accessible. And we have found that it's really helped.
Yeah, finding those kind of friction points and figuring out how to remove them is an essential piece of the dimension. Oh, it looks like my dog is going to make an appearance in this webinar. I think one of the things that we hear a lot about from clients and folks out there is, whenever you're sort of, connecting multiple systems and, some government systems can be, fairly antiquated. And when you're trying to get systems to talk to each other, sometimes that can create some of this, difficulty. But smoothing that out with resident education, things like the video, and just making it as straightforward and intuitive as possible can be a real difference maker in terms of adoption of the online channels and getting more people to just feel very, very comfortable using online transaction methodologies. Let's talk a little bit about where customer experience is going kind of from here. So one of the themes that we talk about in the report that accompanies this survey was this idea that there's this government customer experience 2.0 wave starting to emerge. So, over the last decade or so, even longer perhaps, government organizations have been shifting service delivery online and opening online channels. But as we have kind of seen that first wave of digital in government start to, kind of settle in and see some of these areas where there might still be a little bit of a clunky user experience, we're starting to hear about and think about what is the next wave of government customer experience look like? How do you kind of continue to move the needle and make it even better? So we sort of came up with this concept of government customer experience 2.0. one of the things we hear about loud and clear is when we ask government organization leadership, thinking about what do you have today in terms of online transactions versus offline, and how much of would you like to see that grow over time? And the goals are very ambitious. So, we asked the question of, sort of, what do you have today that's collected digitally? And then how much would you like to see be collected digitally in the next 1 or 2 years? So that, it's the chart where there's a little bit of a drawing, a box drawn around that. That is the sum of people who want at least 50% all the way up to 100% of transactions happening online. And that's a, very, very decent chunk of the respondents. It's about 3/4 of the respondents want to see somewhere between half and all of their transactions online. So if what you want is more digital adoption, then the question becomes, why do you want that? And so, here we start seeing these themes again of, it improves the public perception of your agency. It makes you more responsive to what residents need. It just makes government services more available and more accessible for underserved groups, things like that. So, there were lots of kind of things to like about seeing a platform that actually does drive that online adoption. And I'm curious, Mark and Rachel, how do you guys think about, Rachel, you kind of alluded to this with some of that, oh, let's put a QR code on, let's post a video. But how do you guys think about digital adoption? Is this something that you guys are prioritizing? And if so, how do you think about it, and what's motivating behind it, and what tactics are you using that are working to actually make those outcomes happen?
So we kind of try to attack it from every angle. So we make sure that we do mailing campaigns for the people who aren't going to be on our social media, who aren't going to be on X, or they're not going to be on Facebook, or they're not going to get a Google ad. It doesn't mean that they're not going to pay online, but it just means that they may not be having an active presence in those areas. So we send out mailers, we send out inserts, we keep our bills updated. But then we also do the social side of it as well. We do digital ads, we do social media posts, we do videos in the hallway at City Hall, just kind of information everywhere on when you go to the window to pay. Instead of that, there's a QR code to pay for PayIt. There's handouts that we have, booths in the hall. We just kind of try to do it from every direction to make sure we're reaching all of our residents.
Yeah. Mark, anything you'd add there?
Yeah, you got to get creative a little bit because everybody gets so much social media, so much email, so much electronic messaging. We've even partnered with the library because you want to reach those people who aren't necessarily going to hear from you. So we try to get as creative as we can. But obviously for us, absolutely, digital adoption is top priority. So we're coming from a system, and I don't know how many of your listeners would know this. There's a thing called a mainframe, and it's been around for 50, 60 years, and the city of St. Louis still operated on one. And so we've been breaking away from that. And certainly there are challenges to digital adoption when you go that route. But the fear always is if you grow too soon and you don't do it the right way, are you actually creating more headaches for yourself? So for us, it's about consistent growth. The speed of it, absolutely, you want to have it, but if you don't do it the right way, it's really not going to be effective. So we've been very lucky. We've kind of grown with PayIt for the last 8-9 years, whatever that happens to be, and we've done it in, I think, the right way that has customer satisfaction is extremely high with PayIt and the city of St. Louis. And for us, obviously, we collect on a number of different taxes, earnings tax, personal property tax, real estate tax. We also do water and refuse. So for us, obviously, the faster we can get that money in and then get it out to the appropriate parties, the better off we are, and certainly the better off the citizens of the city of St. Louis are.
Yeah, a couple of themes there really, I thought were very striking. One, Rachel, you made the point of you really have to kind of, fire on all cylinders and use as many different channels as you can think of, because reaching people, it is kind of a multi-channel effort, right? Not everybody is going to be on social media. Not everybody is looking carefully at their mail. Not everybody is, necessarily searching or even expecting to have a digital experience. And so that really proactive kind of ongoing communication about the service availability, particularly some of those more kind of creative channels like collaborating with the library or posting videos in City Hall or things like that. That kind of jumped out at me. And Mark, I think, the way you talked about, seeing digital, that shift to digital emerge kind of gradually while really focusing on maintaining a good customer experience as that growth is happening. Both of those themes, I think, are really going to be, kind of front and center for any agency that's starting to think about how do you deliver a great digital customer experience. So thank you for sharing about both of those. We talk a little bit in the report about sort of how do you get to that government customer experience 2.0, that sort of second wave of a customer experience, and how is it different, right? I think, there was sort of this period of time where we just needed an online channel, right? And, the people took sort of fast routes to do that. And so sort of, plopped a, payment portal on a website or things like that. As we start thinking about sort of the second wave, or how do you really make that a customer experience instead of just kind of offering a way to pay online and hoping people find it. A few themes really emerge. One is, you designed the system as though a digital interaction comes first and assume that digital is sort of the default. The second one is kind of designing around the customer experience or the user experience, right? Instead of designing around maybe the underlying business process in the agency, but thinking about the perspective of the end user or the resident who's going to use the system. And then conversely, even thinking about the experience for agency personnel, right? Because these systems sort of have two sides. And if they're not intuitive and easy to use, both for residents as well as the crew, that can be really challenging. And then, another theme that has emerged is building it to drive measurable outcomes, right? So being able to say, our agency has a goal of this much digital use because we want to save, drive efficiencies here or save money here so that we can redeploy personnel or funding to different services or different projects. Mark, you had kind of alluded to some, we were able to focus on other projects because of some of the efficiency gains that we had. Does this kind of point of view about like a second wave of customer experience, does it resonate for you? And is this how you guys think about this?
Well, sure. For us specifically, it's always curious to me to get the feedback from a taxpayer. Because I've been in government, I know what we do here, I understand the processes. And so sometimes things are very simple for me to understand, but when I go to a taxpayer and I say, hey, this is what we're doing, they go, I don't know why you're doing it that way. So for us, it's always critical to get that feedback and understand, I need to be doing this for the taxpayer, not for the taxpayer to do it for us. And so that's part of the design process when we're having these things. We can be very tunnel visioned about what we do here, and we know what's best for us, and we know what's easiest for us. But if it doesn't take into account the taxpayer's needs or the taxpayer's understanding or the taxpayer's satisfaction on how they're going to use that, then they're going to stop using it. And they're going to go tell their friend, hey, don't use that, don't do that. So for us, it's critical that exactly what you said, the user experience for us has always been top priority, and we'll adjust on the back end. Certainly, we want it to work for everybody, all the parties involved. But if it doesn't work for the user, then it really doesn't matter what we do.
How do you collect that feedback from taxpayers? Can you share a little bit about that process?
Well, we get a lot of feedback on social media, and we get a lot of feedback at neighborhood meetings. We have Collector Daily is a neighborhood meeting every week, or he'll go to different events and people come up to him and strike up a conversation, and he's very open to that feedback and he really appreciates it. So he'll give them our phone number, have them to call us. We try to collect it any way we can so that we can kind of look at what we're doing and see how we can do it better.
Yeah. That's great. Anything else you would add here, Rachel, in terms of just the overall, your point of view on kind of the customer experience or some of these themes?
Yeah, so one of the things you have up there is integrated to other agency systems. And one thing that I've noticed is that after another department's busy season, or like when they're peaking on their bills, our other payment areas see a surge. So after the property tax, real estate, personal property tax bills are due in December 31st, then the next couple of months of water bills, we see a lot of new users who have added that service on, and now they're using that as well. So other areas help us grow in ours too. So it's very interesting to see that, but it just kind of creates a surge of users.
Yeah, that is interesting. And we see that, you know, in other agencies that we work with as well, where somebody who's using one service often, you know, then kind of readily transitions to adopt digital for a different service as well. Oh, and this is actually kind of a similar, this chart has sort of a similar theme. So the idea here is, you know, there's this kind of virtuous cycle when you are doing digital, right? So people try digital services and they work as expected and they have a good experience with it. For the agency, that's fewer support interactions, fewer manual processes, et cetera. They get money faster, they fund services faster, and then everybody benefits, right? The agency is able to operate more efficiently and residents are more satisfied. And then some of that kind of word of mouth happens and more people then use digital and so on. And so, you know, we think that when you really deliver kind of a resident experience that's positive and intuitive, you know, doesn't make anybody like paying taxes any better. But, you know, Mark, you had kind of said at the beginning of the call, they want to get in and get out and have it be easy, right? And so when that happens, there's this kind of cycle of goodness that just continues and grows. So when we think about agencies that maybe are a little bit earlier in their life cycle of driving digital adoption, you know, a cycle like this, you know, can be very, very powerful. I'm curious, you know, Mark and Rachel, do you guys have advice for an agency that is maybe a little bit earlier in the journey around some of these themes, and like, and how do you get started and kind of do that growth that's going to benefit residents and the agency over time?
I would say just kind of stick with it. So we started in 2016 and our adoption wasn't super high the first year, but then the next couple of years it grew much faster. It just kind of takes a little while for a few people to try it, and then that word of mouth, like, hey, I did this, I trusted, it works, and then it kind of spreads from there, and then the campaigns roll out and people learn more about it. They come in to pay in person and they realize, you mean I could have stayed home and done this on my couch? And it just kind of happens, you know, organically over time. It will grow a lot faster, and then on the back end you'll see how you can move the money through faster, and then that helps to kind of push the promotion too, because you can explain that benefit to residents also, like, hey, our schools are receiving their funding this much faster because the payments are coming through online, and people adapt for that too.
I think the other thing I would say is be engaged. So our boss for a very long time has said he doesn't have vendors, he has partners, and that's what he's looking for. And so we partnered with PayIt. And what we did was we were engaged in the process on both ends. We didn't wait for someone to come in and tell us what they were going to do. We kind of offered what we would like it to do. PayIt and the City of St. Louis and the Collector of Revenue's office all have the same messaging when we send something out. Be consistent about what you're doing. Have it be in your language. Everybody's got their own language and how they deal with the taxpayer. Make sure that PayIt's language is your language, and that when that message goes out, everybody is saying the same thing. There's nothing worse than jumping in and this guy's telling you one thing, this guy's telling you another thing, and you know, the process becomes confusing. Make it easy on the taxpayer, but be engaged, because, you know, obviously PayIt has been doing this for a long time. What works for some other client isn't going to work for us. And so it's important to make sure that it is working for you, because if it doesn't work for you, it's not going to work for your taxpayer. It's not going to work for your employees. It's not going to work for you know, the clients that you're trying to interact with. And for us, obviously, if you can fund your services faster, that's to great benefit. We've been very fortunate here in the city of St. Louis to experience a lot of growth in our collections. And so what that's allowed us to do is to take advantage of the high interest rates right now. We were able to take some of that money that we ordinarily wouldn't have at this time because we were able to collect it sooner and invest in some treasury bills and return even more money to the city of St. Louis. So that's been a great benefit to us and great benefit to the city.
Yeah. So I'm going to recap. There was so much greatness in your commentary there. So some of the things I heard were stick with it. Adoption kind of has a little bit of an exponential growth curve. So it might seem a little bit, underwhelming at first, but then it kind of growth sort of accelerates in that adoption. Another one I heard was making sure that your vendor is really a good partner and has kind of shares your goals and shares your, kind of point of view on how to work together. And then I really liked also, Mark, your comment about making sure that the service delivery is consistent and sort of, the way you're communicating about it is both consistent across channels as well as in kind of the right voice and using the right language that's used elsewhere. And that is, very localized to the community. So, and then the final theme was just the value of being able to collect faster, invest funds, fund services more quickly, but also, do some of those investment strategies to actually, raise some money and that, ultimately turns into not an increase in taxes overall. Anything else I missed there in my recap?
I don't think so.
Okay. Great. Okay, just a couple more things. I thought it would be interesting to share some non-St. Louis outcomes from, using kind of a more advanced customer experience and digital transaction tools. Our client, Jackson County in Missouri, funded their school system on day one of their property tax season last year. Our client, Beaufort County, South Carolina, invested, and this is back to your theme, Mark, their early property tax collections and received a return from those last year that was an equivalent of a 13% tax increase that they did not have to do because of the investment collections that they were able to get. And then finally, in Cabarrus County, North Carolina, speaking again to that theme of kind of how adoption grows, they saw digital collections double over the course of 3 years from 2020 to 2023. So, there are real kind of measurable outcomes back to that theme that I highlighted a couple of slides ago, and we always encourage, as we are partnering with different government agencies, set a goal, set measurable, quantifiable goals that you want to see happen, and then track your pacing to those. Because it's always good to be able to say, look, this is a leading indicator of whether or not this solution is delivering the value that we had hoped it would. So anything you would add or comment on those, Mark and Rachel?
No, so we kind of have like a real world impact that we did last year was for the 2023 property tax bills. We normally would release those on November 10th because we don't get the tax rates till mid-October. And by the time we get that data entered in, the bills printed, the bills stuffed, and the bill mailed, we would release all that on November 10th. Well, because of our partnership with PayIt last year, as soon as we got the rates in, we were able to release all that on PayIt so people could pay earlier. So by our November 10th date last year, we had already collected $13 million. So that's money we would never have collected until after November 10th. So we were able to get that through that much faster.
Yeah. Mark, anything you'd add there?
Only that we're still in the process of collecting all that. We're at our fiscal year end, so a little challenging to get all the numbers and pull that out, but certainly we have seen growth there. But the other thing I would tell you is, from our standpoint, we still haven't, even as far as we're concerned, scratched the surface of what we think we can do. We've got an entire earnings tax that we haven't touched, that we're in the process of converting over to both online payments, but also online filing. So we're really excited about what we can see. And so my guess would be, the digital collections I see from property tax doubled from Cabarrus County, North Carolina. We're looking for maybe quadrupling. What we have right now is an express page to pay your earnings tax. And we see a ton of people going that direction anyway. But we have about another $200 million that we think we're going to be able to get through in the next couple of years through PayIt via earnings tax. So we're really excited about that.
Wow, that's awesome. That's fantastic. Okay, well, everybody's going to be relieved to know I'm only going to talk for one more slide and then we're going to take questions. So, and this, kind of goes back to that theme of how do you actually champion customer experience in your organization? If you are a government agency and you're looking to either implement your first ever digital platform for service delivery and transactions, or maybe you're looking to upgrade it, what are some things to kind of keep in mind, right? So, one is sourcing requirements from both the kind of business leaders as well as the technical leaders. So, IT might talk about, oh, it's got to integrate to this mainframe or this backend system. It's got to be secure. It's got to be, compliant with, payment compliance or things like that. But, line of business leaders are also going to say, yeah, but, we have this process where we get tax rates and then we have to implement those, and put them into a system and so on and so forth. And so sourcing those requirements from kind of all sides is really advice we give to just about anybody who is thinking about this. And then, making sure, again, back to that measurable outcome. So define and communicate those goals, right? And then track how you're pacing to those, whether it's an amount that you're trying to collect or time to revenue or reducing delinquency, or, maybe you're trying to eliminate a manual process. Any of those could be outcomes that you're targeting. But if you don't measure it, you don't manage it, as they say. And so having those kind of really clearly defined outcomes and getting aligned on those kind of, really sets the stage for success. And then we also always advise, evaluate whether to buy or build. In today's world, there are really great solutions, whether it's for property tax collection or, licensing and permitting or a variety of other services. There are really good configurable platforms out there, PayIt, but also, lots of other ones that, are a little bit easier to implement versus kind of growing your own software systems. And it feels like there's a real shift towards, it is generally better. There's generally a solution out there that can be more, sort of fit for purpose than having to spend resources building your own. The graphic here is, we asked both line of business and IT leaders, what are the barriers that you've experienced to actually being able to implement or upgrade a system? Competing IT priorities was a really significant one on both sides. And that goes back to that buy or build, right? So you've got constrained IT resources in any government organization. And so spending those resources wisely and making sure that, where you don't have to use IT resources to get something done, you don't is kind of a good rule of thumb. And then, procurement processes and rules can be challenging. IT cited that one. Budget constraints are certainly something that everybody's familiar with. But then there was an interesting one, and I'd love Mark and Rachel to get your perspective on this. Line of business leaders talked a lot about organizational resistance to change and how that has kind of impacted their ability to, implement or upgrade digital systems. If you think back to, 2016, 2017, as you were starting this journey, first of all, do these themes resonate? And in particular, I'm curious about, sort of some of the change management dimensions that you went through over that time.
So definitely for the organizational resistance to change, I think that one of the things that we did throughout this process was the people who were in creating our paid experience, we tested it like crazy and we shared that with our staff and we asked them for their feedback on it, and they kind of were on board. They knew what was going on, they knew what was coming, so we didn't just roll out something and they were completely taken by surprise. What is this? Throughout the process we asked them, like, what are the calls you're getting, what are the things that we can try to address with this experience that will make your job easier? And we asked them for their input, we asked them for their ideas. And so we did, you always are going to experience some resistance to change, but we tried to do our best to minimize that and to make sure that everyone kind of knew what was coming. And then whenever we rolled it out, we made sure everyone was trained on it, that they knew that what they were doing. So we found that that actually really helped. And then down the road, whenever we would have an update or a new feature, kind of the same thing. It would be like, oh, when we got imported payments, like, I don't know how it's going to work. But then they realized, like, wait, this took a process was so long to something that's very short. It's amazing. It's wonderful. I'm on board. I'm going to tell all the other people in the department, this is really easy to do and this is cool for us. So,
yeah. Mark, anything to add there?
I would say, as far as competing IT priorities, we didn't have any. This was our top priority as we were moving forward. Certainly, you have the day-to-day minutia of printers not working or networks not being connected and those kind of things. But we're very lucky that the administration, and we have a very talented IT team. I mean, we are very blessed with that IT team. But they were very much in line with the same vision we had. We were able to meet several times before this even started to see how are we going to move forward with this thing? How are we going to make this work day to day operationally? But the priority was always the same, was to get to the point that we're at now. And that continues to be the case. And that's why we have had, I think, significant success doing this, and why it's been so easy for us to move on to the next phase of what we're doing here, because it's just growing. If you've got good bones, you can build the house. And I think that's what we have here, is we had good bones. And as far as budget constraints, absolutely, fiscally responsible, you got to be that. But what we've seen is the return on investment, the ROI that we got, it just made sense to continue. And I think that was it. As long as you can justify that in a taxpayer's eyes, because that's really, reputation of the office, that's what matters. And if the tax-paying public sees that what they're doing, what's happening with their taxpayer dollars makes sense to them and is value added, they're going to be on board with that. And I think that's the case for us.
Yeah. Did you guys, as you were embarking on the journey or along the way, did you have kind of specific, like, measurable goals that you were tracking against in terms of adoption or, time to revenue or things like that?
So one of the things that we track is the switch from mail payments to digital. So when we launched it in 2016, we were at 82% mail, 16% digital payments. And now we're at 52% mail and 48% digital payments. So we've seen a huge shift in that. And that's something, and then we can track that by areas, by neighborhoods. And so we can know, like, here's where we need to make a bigger push, or this is an area that we should target, or we should see what kind of messaging would work better in this neighborhood for adoption. And then we kind of use that to grow.
Yeah, that's great. Is there anything that this is going to be kind of a funky question, but is there anything that you wish you had known that you know now? If you could go back in your time machine and tell 2016 Collector of Revenue's office, hey, watch out for this, or you might be surprised by this. Any surprising outcomes or anything you wish you had known?
One of the things that actually was kind of hard was our success that caused problems. Is that we had our import file was set up to only accept 999 payments. And then after that, it would just roll over and start from zero, but it was the same batch. And so we started to go over 999, and then we started to go over 1,999 a day. So we were like, we have to make sure we have like 5 of these so we can take 5,000 payments in a day, so we don't keep rolling into this and then the payments are getting duplicated, or you know what I mean? We had to grow really fast to be able to accept it, which is awesome. But it was kind of something we weren't expecting to happen like that. And it was whenever we had those days is like, wow, our growth is what's the pain point, but that's a good thing to have. And with PayIt, we were able to get it resolved very quickly and continue to grow that. So
kind of a good problem to have, but a problem nevertheless, probably.
Yeah. And I guess another thing is when we send emails to customers when their bills are coming out, kind of give them some information, let them know how they can pay it, that they can make payments. We didn't do that in 2016. We didn't do that until probably 2022. But like last year on our first day, we had a 57% open rate. That's really high. And that means to me that customers trust these emails. They want to know what's going on, and then they go from there and they pay. So it again helps us get the money in even faster.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mark, anything to add there? Any warnings you would give your 2016 self?
I don't think there's any warnings, but piggybacking off of that, I think what we did experience was a lot of pushback from the taxpayers saying, hey, how come I can do this way, but I can't do this way? And I think if we had done maybe a little bit more messaging and saying, look, growth takes time and there are considerations that have to happen and you have to do this the right way, I think we would have been more transparent with the taxpayers that, hey, we're doing what we can at this time. We have a plan for this. We have a plan for this. And I think if we had shared that, that might have eliminated some of those complaints. But as of right now, we're extremely happy with the process that we went through to get here. And I think anytime you have challenges along the way, that's good. Those are good things. Those are good problems to have. And again, we were very fortunate that PayIt was we were growing with PayIt, and I think PayIt was growing with us. So we were very lucky to be in on that ground floor kind of level and be able to shape it for what we needed to do. And so for us, the ability to go to PayIt and say, hey, we've got an idea. Here's something we want to try. What can we do to get this done? And then be able to go back to the taxpayer and say, hey, it's coming. And here's what it's going to look like. I think that's one of the things I would have said to our earlier selves is make sure you're letting the taxpayer know what the process is going to look like.
Yeah, that's interesting. We did have a question in the survey and it's in the report. One of the most frequent, we said, if you had a good experience online, what else would you expect? And be expecting to be able to pay, do other services online was one of the things that, a majority of our respondents said that they would expect. So, you do one thing online and then you start expecting other services to be available there. And so I really liked your commentary about, communicating kind of a roadmap of this is what's first. Our goal is to ultimately deliver other services online as well. This is what that's going to look like, and kind of managing expectations, both in terms of getting people excited about what lies ahead, but also kind of communicating really proactively about what's available today and what's planned for the future. Makes a lot of sense to me. Any other comments on this one? If not, we might just see what other questions we have from the audience.
Sure.
Okay. All right, Nadia, do we have some audience questions?
Yes, thank you, Kelly. Before we go into Q&A, let us remind our audience that the full report, which is the 2024 Adoption Index Report, is available to you guys in the handout section on the right-hand side of your screen. It's more than 20 pages of the findings that we discovered, and it's a fantastic source of information to kind of go into the year well-informed. As far as the questions that I jotted down as the discussion was taking place, there's one for you, Kelly. And this one says, which survey finding was the most surprising for you and why? And I guess maybe we could extend the same to Mark and Rachel.
Oh, gosh. I think that I was pleasantly surprised that the frequency with which people were encountering challenges online was not higher. The kind of 22% glitches, things like that, it's still, I think everybody wants it to be better than that, but I was pleasantly surprised that we didn't see that, even higher than it was. And then I think the other one was, I was a little bit, and this was also a really pleasant surprise, pleased with that outcome of how willing people are to kind of recommend and share with others when they do have one of these great experiences, and they're going to tell people. And there is that kind of word of mouth cycle that emerges when people have a positive experience with that. I'm so curious to hear what Mark and Rachel have, if there was anything that struck them besides those things.
I think that one of the things that really surprised me was the rate of people who would vote based on the experience they have with an offense. One of the things that we kind of hear is that if you're not writing a check out to a department, or you're not writing a name, that you're not seeing that on a regular basis, is you kind of won't remember that when you get to the poll. But that kind of shows that the people still do kind of correlate the two, and they realize that, okay, under this person, they've brought these advancements and this new technology and these awesome customer experiences, and they use that to educate themselves and make their vote.
Yeah. Mark, how about you?
I think the findings kind of confirmed a lot of what we've already experienced, though. Certainly that 71% where they would recommend to someone else. I can't tell you how many times we go on, Mr. Daly is very active on X, and we'll see a taxpayer make a comment, and before we can even respond to it, another taxpayer has responded to that positively and has guided them in the right direction. Say, hey, I just did this same thing. Go to PayIt, go to the collector's website, go to wherever it is. So absolutely, that's the one that I wasn't surprised by it at all. It just kind of confirmed what we've already seen.
Yeah, I love those real life examples.
That's fantastic. A couple of questions that you guys already answered were also asked in the Q&A section, which is, by the way, is on the right-hand side of the screen for those who still want to submit questions. People wanted to know what advice you would have given yourself at the beginning of the journey. So I'm glad, Kelly, that naturally occurred to you to ask that question. We covered that. People also wanted to know what the main challenges were for St. Louis specifically, and we covered that question as well, that strangely enough, the IT priorities and the challenge there was not really the number one for you guys in St. Louis, because you collaborate with your IT fantastically. But there's another question that I think we could cover. So Rachel, you mentioned that right now you're split between the in-person or non-digital and digital payments is close to 50-50. You said 52% mail and 40-some% digital. Is there a plan in St. Louis to go 100% digital? Is it an aspiration, or you're preparing for something else?
I think what we would like to go as digital as we can. We have to expect that there's still going to be some unbanked residents who are always going to prefer to come in, some people who just don't want to do it online. And so we are going to make sure that we always offer that, but we are going to continue to grow our digital presence. We're going to get digital to promote it and to inform people about it, just so that we want to be 40% mail, 60% digital in the next year or two, and then continue to increase that digital number over the next couple of years. But we'll never get rid of all of our, walk-ins, cash, checks, because we know that there are going to be people who just never want to convert to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I find that if you force somebody to do something, you get a lot more resistance than if you offer it as an option and they get to make that decision. I think organically and naturally, just the way that we're headed, we're going to continue to see that growth there. But I don't think we ever want to mandate that taxpayers have to pay in a certain way.
Yeah. It's bad enough to pay taxes, right?
Yeah.
Great. We will take one last question, and for anything else, we will make sure we answer everyone else's questions through email after the webinar. And this question is for St. Louis. Do you see any difference in your adoption rates between different cohorts of your residents, whether it's younger people versus seniors or any other split?
I think one of the things that we saw initially was we only offered online. We didn't offer IVR, and we had a lot of our older residents who would call and ask if we could get IVR payments available. So we added that, but then over time, as they become more familiar with the IVR, they then switch over to digital. So it's kind of a step for them in between. So that's one of the things that we found, is that as we have the different channels available, it's kind of a pathway to get them to the digital experience. And I don't track too much by age, but yeah, that's one of the things we found.
Yeah, that is interesting. I hadn't really thought about IVR as sort of a stepping stone, but it does make sense. We didn't include it in the presentation, but in the report, we have a breakdown by kind of age cohort. So, from greatest generation to boomers to Generation X to, Generation Z and millennials. And we were actually very surprised, even, among that sort of, baby boomers and even greatest generation, the willingness to transact online was higher than we expected. And there was not as big of a gap as you might have expected. And I think that was really, speaking of surprising findings, that was an interesting one. So everyone be sure to download the report. There's quite a bit more data in there. And that was one that I thought was very interesting because I think there's always that temptation to think, my grandmother would never do this or whatever, but the data does not support it. So we stand corrected a little bit on that. But I like the idea of, ultimately there's this sort of pathway, and maybe IVR is that path. for some people, and being able to serve people the way that they want to be served. And, our expectation is that the appetite for digital is going to continue to grow over time as people just come to expect it even more than they do today. But, to your point, there are probably always going to be people who would rather call in or mail in or things like that. And, being able to serve people in multiple different channels is really, really valuable.
All right. And with that, this is all we have for today. So Mark, Rachel, thank you so much for making time to be here with us on this webinar. Kelly, thank you so much for a fantastic presentation. And to our audience, we will send out the recording of this webinar right after the live event. Thank you so much.